Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today I am interviewing Dr. Courtney Hill. She is a board certified pediatric ENT physician, and she is developing a novel technology that is going to revolutionize the way ear infections are handled. And ear infections are a very, very common problem, and they are a huge health burden, and not just a health burden, but they also are very difficult for parents to deal with and obviously painful for children. In this interview, we are going to talk all about how Dr. Hill came up with the idea, how she started her research on how to move forward with it, how she got funding, where the product is at now, and what she's looking to do in 2024 and beyond. Hi, Courtney. Welcome. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Saya. Thank you so much.
So tell me about Glimpse Diagnostics. What is Glimpse Diagnostics?
So what we've done at Glimpse is really create a way for parents to get the help that they need for their kids when they think that there might be an ear infection. And what we do is really facilitate the telemedicine evaluation for kids' ears. Right now, that's not something that happens.
Right. So parents can actually look inside the child's ear with a device that you have, or do they already have devices like that they can use at home? Can you explain a little bit more about how a parent would use your product?
So right now, actually, anyone can buy an otoscope or an ear camera on Amazon. They run from about $15 to $50. They're pretty much all exactly the same. I have one here. You can see it. This is one that we purchased and we're working with. These are available, but the problem is that parents don't know what they're looking at. They don't know what they're looking for. And they need a healthcare provider to be able to interpret what's going on. These are very nice to use at home because they're inexpensive. And if you can use it and get a great image of the eardrum, then a provider could look and try to interpret what's going on. What we've created at Glimpse is actually a foolproof way for parents to be able to get a great eardrum image. It's that eardrum that they need to see, the provider wants to see it. And we took advantage of our knowledge of children's ear anatomy to be able to make a tip that goes on the otoscope. Is called the speculum. You'd put it right here. And it helps to guide the parent without them knowing what they're looking for, without any other technology. It's sort of built into the speculum or the tip itself. From there, we thought that it was really important to aid the providers in understanding what they're looking at. So from my practice, what I realized is that there would maybe be a child who I was seeing that after seeing their pediatrician or their family practice doc, and my interpretation of what was going on was different from what they had received the day before or maybe even the week before. And a lot of that has to do with ears can change, but also in the ENT office, there's a lot more tools to be able to understand what's happening. And so you might be able to get a better, more accurate diagnosis. And when I was starting to recognize that this was happening, I looked into the literature and found that pediatricians are typically 50-50 accurate for their diagnosis of ear disease, which isn't great, but ENTs also aren't that great. We're only at 73%. And we've spent all this time in training just for ears and understanding that. So when I saw that data, I thought, my goodness, there's got to be technology that would help that. And this was years ago. And I thought, there's this thing I've heard of called AI. Now it's a real hot button topic and everybody's heard of it. But this was back in 2019 when I started thinking about it and looking at some of the research and what had been published. Sure enough, there were some artificial intelligence models or algorithms that could distinguish some different ear disease patterns. And so I thought, wow, this would be a great use case to really improve that diagnosis, but to also get at some of the pain points that I was hearing from parents and trying to get some help conveniently at the time that the kids were having trouble. And this was all spelling out to be a telemedicine.
So those numbers are pretty wild. What do you think is the reason for those numbers in terms of diagnostic accuracy?
For sure. It's a really tough exam. And on top of it, you've got a squirrely little one who's all over the place and you're trying to get a good view of the eardrum. Those numbers come from physicians looking at videos of pneumatic otoscopy, which is the gold standard for diagnosis. And I just want to point out that there are additional tests that can be done that will help you improve your diagnosis. Things like tympanometry or measuring how the eardrum is moving and if there's any fluid behind it. And oftentimes in the ENT office, that is used pretty standard just to get as much information as possible to get to a better diagnosis. And sometimes in pediatricians' offices, they use those too. It just depends on each practice and what their standards are.
And so I guess also at home, if the parent is doing the recording, and this is not really scientifically proven, but it could be also that the child may be a little bit more amenable to the exam. I can say that when I check my son's eye, he seems to be pretty okay with me checking it versus, the minute I take him into the doctor's office, it's just screaming, crying, grabbing me really tight and not being very cooperative, to say the least.
Well, for sure, if you can do it from home where the child's already comfortable, they know their surroundings, they know their mom or dad, versus going into a more sterile environment, lots of people they don't know. Certainly, here comes a doctor right at their ear, to find it out. Absolutely, there can be a difference. And if you're not feeling well, you want comfort. You want to be with your mom. You want to cuddle up. And if you can do that and get a great ear exam, all the better.
Yeah, it is very tough. Examining a child is very tough. There's a reason I'm an adult ophthalmologist and not a pediatric ophthalmologist because I love kids, but I was like, I don't think I can do this. So I do see some kids in my practice, but not that many. So how does your device specifically help parents take a better image than what they would otherwise take?
Well, parents, when we think about it, don't often know what the eardrum looks like. How does it look different from the ear canal? In other words, the hallway on the inside of the ear. And so what the device does is actually line up the view appropriately. And we do this according to what we know about children's ear canal anatomy.
Is there like an auto capture feature when the image is appropriate that it would auto capture, or is the parent like prompted to take the picture at that moment in time?
So what we learned from usability testing is that if you have an otoscope, say you have this in your hand, you have your child that you're trying to hold in another arm, and then you're trying to put this in, and then where's your third arm to capture an image on your phone? And so we've actually worked out a lot of usability testing with parents and found that if they take a video just to start with, then they are very easily able to capture a great video, great exam. And at the end, they take everything out of the ear, press stop recording on their phone, and we have the technology to go in and then pull out what is relevant for the healthcare provider to have a look at.
Okay, that's awesome. So you really are just taking it out of the parents' hands in terms of just get as much data as you can, and then we'll take care of the rest in terms of sifting through the data and figuring out which are the relevant images that we want to send to the doctor through a telemedicine platform that can then, actually decide if it is, in fact, an ear infection. Now, one other thing that you had mentioned before in some of our conversations was about antibiotics. Can you talk a little bit about the Mayo Clinic study and antibiotics in children? And of course, this is just one study, but it's an interesting study. So I'd love to kind of hear more about it.
Recently, there was a Mayo Clinic study that was published that had evaluated children over the long term. I don't remember exactly the number of years, but they were looking at a population of children who had received antibiotics before the age of 2. And then they were checking on their development through childhood specifically and seeing if there were any correlations that could point to being caused by having the antibiotics early on compared to a population of children who did not receive the antibiotics. And they found that there were statistically significant differences in the rates of obesity, celiac disease, ADHD, and a variety of other childhood onset diseases that when they looked at it and when they modeled it out, really the only difference was that that group of children had received antibiotics under age 2. Now, antibiotics, when needed, are perfectly appropriate. And I don't want to say anything terrible about antibiotics, but you want to use them appropriately. And that study really demonstrated why we need to be judicious with our use of antibiotics.
Yeah, and I would say, even as a physician, I, have no problem with antibiotics, but you're right. I mean, these children are young, they're vulnerable. We certainly don't want to give them out when it's not needed. And viral infection is so common as a young child that antibiotics wouldn't do anything about that. But one of the main reasons people do get antibiotics as young kids is for an ear infection. So we want to be pretty confident that it is, in fact, an ear infection that is causing the problem. My question regarding the antibiotics is there, and I don't know if the study actually went through this or not, but was there an amount? Like, was it just one dose? Was it, 5 times, or were they able to quantify the amount of exposure?
I don't believe so. I would love to see a study that was, more dose related and understanding is there a threshold there, but I don't believe that they had looked at that.
Okay, good to know. So getting back to Glimpse Diagnostics, how did you come up with this idea? And I know you had kind of mentioned you had heard about AI, but where were you in your career at that point? Were you in residency? Were you in medical school? When did you start thinking, I'm going to do something beyond clinical medicine? And when did that transformation really start to happen?
For sure. So I think always I had thought about doing something beyond clinical medicine. In residency, I did a lot of research trying to understand about taste and tonsillectomy. After my residency, I did a fellowship in medical device innovation and learned more about that. And what I realized is that when you do something, um, when you're innovating and it's a medical device and it can reach a huge population, you actually have the ability to reach several other groups, maybe not who you're seeing one-on-one, but really have a great impact. And that's what I wanted for my career. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do with that. I just sort of had those tools in my toolbox and went forward. And it was after my fellowship and I was practicing full-time as a pediatric otolaryngologist. And I just started to hear the same problems and needs come up from parents. It was over and over. And so I listened to them first and really took it all in. And I was practicing for over a year before it really was something that sunk in and I started to think about.
So what was the process like when you decided, okay, this is what I'm going to do, this is what I'm going to attempt to do? Did you set aside a budget of your own capital? Did you have a roadmap? I know you have received multiple grants. When did that come into play? I mean, obviously all of this costs money to build. How have you been able to finance your projects?
Right at first, I just thought it was important to understand what I was hearing to really do a lot of research on the background of um, what the problem was, not necessarily jumping to a solution. And then start to think about what solutions could look like. And so the problem I was hearing was parents had a terrible time at home when their kids started to have ear pain. It was always in the nighttime, really disruptive, not only for the child and their sleep, but the entire family. Mom typically bore the burden of comforting the child all through the night and then all of the mental expenditure of what do we do now? What is happening? Well, gosh, we can only wait until tomorrow to find out if we can get into the office and find out. And so, really understanding and doing some good customer research and talking with parents about it outside of practice. I didn't do this, with my parents in practice. And then starting to think about a solution. That's sort of the direction we went.
So when you were talking to those parents, how did you even get in touch with them? Like, was this a forum? Were these just people you knew? Were you quantifying the data? What were you kind of doing with the data? How were you really even approaching this?
So at first, it really had more to do with people I knew and not parents whose kids I was treating, but just in my own network, reaching out to them. I talked to a lot of working moms who worked outside of the home, and just to find out if it was a pain point for them. Talked with moms who were not working outside of the home. Was it a pain point for them? Talked to some dads. It was really just within my network, and I actually just started an Excel spreadsheet and did some Zoom interviews. And by this time, we were creeping into the beginning of the pandemic. And so it actually made it quite easy to get a hold of people and to do things over Zoom because a lot of people were at home, including me. And I just kept a spreadsheet of the data that I was getting. It was really qualitative. And then I also was trying to get at, hey, if there was a solution for this, what would you pay? And that's not exactly the way to approach it and find out how much somebody would pay for something that doesn't exist. But at that time, that was what I did. And actually, that data was very strong, supportive data for our our NSF grant application. And we can talk a little bit more about that too.
Awesome. Yeah. So what is NSF and when did you decide to apply for that grant? And if you're able to disclose how much that grant actually gave you?
So the National Science Foundation is the NSF. It's a branch in the government, and it's funded to give out grants to a variety of folks. One of them is through the Small Business Innovation Research Grant, and that is to small businesses in the United States. It was around the springtime, so right in the beginning of the pandemic in 2020, that I was aware of the grant opportunity. And they have their own process, but one of the things that you can do is submit a small project plan, and then they can give you feedback as to whether it would be appropriate for their mission and what they like to fund. They fund deep technology, and artificial intelligence is recognized as something that is deep technology, as well as engineering and different things. And so both software and hardware are something that they will fund. We went through the process and we're funded a phase one SBIR grant, and all of the phase ones at the time were around $250,000. So that's what we received.
And how much runway did that buy you and how far did that get you? And also, congratulations. That's amazing.
Thank you. So actually, it covered a large portion of the research and development needed for both the artificial intelligence algorithm, which included clinical studies in order to get the data, as well as some of the preliminary work on the hardware or the speculum that's used on the otoscope.
And how much time did you have to spend just finding the people to actually use the capital? So I think that can be pretty challenging in this space because it's not like you meet someone every day that knows how to build an AI product or is very well versed in machine learning. So how did you even find your team now that you had the money?
Well, on the clinical side, that was easy just because of my own background. And so I talked with where I had done my fellowship at Texas Children's and through Texas Children's, and then the Southwest National Pediatric Device Consortium and their affiliated hospitals. We were able to get set up at a total of 4 children's hospitals for our clinical studies. And then on the software side, that's not my background either. And so it took a lot of networking in town in the Twin Cities where I live. There are some great software development shops, and that's where I started. And then just continuing to network and find the right person with the right experience. And it was important to me to also bring people onto the team who really felt like this was a great mission. It was oftentimes people who had young children who had suffered with their children with ear infections, and they were very ready to jump on board and join the team to help out.
Yeah, I can't agree with you more because startups and innovation is very up and down. And when you have a team that really doesn't believe in what you're doing, and it's not for better or for worse, it's just what they're passionate about. It can be challenging to get through those troughs because you're just like, this didn't work and this didn't work. And when is something going to work? Because I know I can get it to work, but I just don't know when I'm going to be able to get it to work. So that's really an important takeaway, I think, from this conversation is finding the right team members who actually believe in it, not just someone who's willing to take your money and execute the job, but also passionate about what you're trying to do. And it has a somewhat vested interest in trying to solve the problem that you're trying to solve. How did you then approach the results of those clinical studies? Like, what was your obligation in terms of reporting? Did you have to answer to the FDA at that point? When does the FDA play into all of this?
Sure. So with the R&D, the FDA, we don't have to answer to FDA for completing the R&D, for using the National Science Foundation funding. You simply report back to National Science Foundation as far as that goes. But for something that you want to get to the market, you do have to answer to FDA. And so FDA and the regulatory pathway for our products was something that I thought of immediately. It was something that I knew played a very strong role in commercialization for anything to do in healthcare medical device. And so actually early on, even before the pandemic started, when I was thinking about this problem, I called up my regulatory advisor. And she has a unique background in that she is a trained pediatrician, trained infectious disease pediatrician, and has spent time at FDA and some very large medical device companies as their senior vice president for regulatory. And just having that knowledge going into what does the FDA pathway look like and how do we actually ascertain what that pathway looks like was very good to have upfront because it is the gatekeeper for any of these medical devices coming to market.
So you were probably involved with that process like 2 years into the journey, maybe?
No, more like 6 months into the journey.
Okay, so pretty early on in terms of wrapping your head around things and at least understanding what is required to go forward. This is kind of a weird question, but it's something that intimidates me. And I'm sure some people watching it's probably intimidating for them too. But this sounds like a mountain of paperwork. Like, how did you even manage to get through all of that? Or was it not? Am I just making this up in my head? But all of this seems like, aside from actually the R&D and actually thinking about the problem, it sounds like there's just a lot of paperwork involved. And as a small team, how did you deal with that?
There is a lot of paperwork. The nice thing is that it's sort of a defined mechanism for how you interact with the FDA and what you need to do. And so it's just a matter of finding someone who can help guide you. I think that was a big key for me. I don't personally know what the FDA process is or didn't know then. Now I'm very well aware of it. But back then, just having someone to help guide through that process. It is a mountain of paperwork. It's very possible to do, even if it's, say, you and an advisor or an assistant to help write it up. What we did at Glimpse, it was very, very early on. And so I personally did all of the writing for that. If you've done anything in healthcare, even remotely along the lines of IRBs or small grant applications, this is nothing. You could do it too. It's very well delineated, and believe me, if you're a doctor in this country, you've done enough paperwork to be able to do this.
Yeah, that's definitely the one thing we really know how to do is paperwork and faxing and verification.
Yeah.
That's like 30%, maybe 40% of my job, I feel like. So, okay, we're gonna move away from that a little bit. Someone who's watching, let's say they're like, I have this great idea, but I know nothing about machine learning. I know nothing about AI, but I know that this is a problem that AI can solve. What is like the first thing they could do?
Honestly, it's in this day and age, the way that AI is developing, you do not need to be a machine learning expert in order to bring it to market. And I very strongly believe that, especially if you're a healthcare provider or a physician and you have the clinical expertise, you should be the one on the front line developing that AI because you also are bringing in your medical knowledge, your medical ethics, and everything that's so important for AI. So first of all, know that. Second of all, know that you can always find the people who have the expertise. They are not going to have the clinical strengths that you have. And so you may know what's clinically relevant, what's not clinically relevant. They're chasing a certain number. Well, for what reason? They don't know. It just might be that's what they know to be useful for machine learning. But you may know as the clinician that this is the number that you should meet, or this is the setting, and this is what the images should look like, or not images. So I think that you should never shy away from something just because you feel you don't have the background for the development as these new technologies emerge.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more. There's a world of contract workers. I mean, maybe not machine learning specifically, but there's a lot of simple tasks that you can outsource. And it's been revolutionary to just have simple websites like Fiverr and Upwork, where you can literally go on and say, I want a website built in a week, and you just can invest the money, and it's typically not that expensive, and you just can have things up and running. Of course, you need to do the maintenance, you need to do the background, you need to understand what you're doing and your goals. But definitely, we're in a world where you can hire a lot of people to do the things that either you don't want to do or don't know how to do. I want to get back to the grant. So you had $250,000 from the grant. Obviously, at some point that ran out. So what have you done since then, or are you still able to survive on the grant money at this point?
So we survived for quite a long time on the grant money. At this point, we have also obtained other grants, and the state of Minnesota is fantastic in that they do offer matching grants for SBIR grants, but I should say it's not matching. They do have just a certain amount that if you have received these grants, they will help you out. A lot of states do have similar opportunities. So we are continuing to exist and move forward because of that. So our plan moving forward, as far as funding goes, we do have the opportunity to apply for additional grants with the National Science Foundation, as well as the National Institute of Health. And so we have two pending grant opportunities there. We hope to be hearing from them in Q1 of 2024. In addition, Glimpse has had quite a lot of attention, especially locally in Minnesota, because we won the healthcare division of the Minnesota Cup. And so that's our statewide business competition that happens every year. So that has brought a lot of attention from local angel investors, and we are actually looking to raise a small seed round to help bridge the gap between our National Science Foundation grant and then upcoming grants that we're hoping for in 2024.
And I just want to say that is so amazing because you at this point still own 100% of your company, which is phenomenal. That is not a feat accomplished by many who are so late in the game, because this is technology that requires a lot of capital to develop. And just for anybody watching, to be able to still have control and a majority stake ownership in a healthcare product is huge. And I say that because healthcare is one of those fields where there is this constant competition between making money and doing what's right. And unfortunately, that is what it has come to in this country. And you just have to constantly be balancing, is this profitable versus is this the right thing to do? And when you have a physician and a healthcare provider at the top making those decisions, as you mentioned earlier, those medical ethics are really important to kind of hold close to the core of your business, because you don't want to rush R&D. You don't want to, put something in the hands of parents that is not useful. And you don't want to underdiagnose an ear infection or a situation where a patient needs an antibiotic and the technology is telling, or is advising that maybe they don't. So it's actually pretty hard to develop this kind of technology. And so that's really why I wanted to interview you, because it's so incredible that you've been able to do this through grants and really stay true to the core mission. And I think that's really, really important and very commendable. So what's on the roadmap for 2024?
So in 2024, we expect to have a very exciting year. We are looking for pilot partners and are in some conversations now to do that and really get the technology out there and demonstrate its use with telemedicine. Ultimately, when we commercialize, we are aiming to sell to businesses, so B2B model. And we're looking to partner with telemedicine groups, with rural healthcare groups, and demonstrate how Glimpse can really work in those settings. What's more is we are starting our process for FDA clearance. And so we have some large clinical studies that need to happen, and they will also start next year. So we're very much looking forward to 2024.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for watching. If you have enjoyed this video, please hit the like and subscribe button below and be sure to share it with someone else. It not only helps the channel, but it helps all of our entrepreneurs and innovators that come on here that are trying to make a difference. Thanks. So of course, there must be a patent involved. So have you applied for a patent, and what different parts of the company require a patent? Because from my understanding, Glimpse is not one product, it's actually two products. Is that correct?
Right. So what we offer is both the speculum for parents to be able to get a great ear exam at home. And then on the other side, on the provider side, we have the machine learning or artificial intelligence algorithm that can classify what is going on in the picture of the eardrum. So does it look like an ear infection, ear fluid, neither of those, or my favorite, there's no eardrum in this picture. So we have that to make sure that we're not diagnosing a picture of the wall or the picture of the outer ear or something. Um, so then as far as patents go, yes, it's important for each of those portions of the company to have intellectual property protection, and you can do that with patents. Even with software, it's important you are able to obtain patents, and you just need to work with an intellectual property lawyer who does have that experience. If they have experience in medical device and software together, if that's what you're working on, that usually gives a very successful outcome. And we have ours that are patent pending.
Thank you so much for joining us. This was very informative, really interesting. Love all the work that you're doing. I would love to do a follow-up interview in about a year to see where Glimpse is at and see any headway that you've made. If you're watching this and you know a partner that Dr. Hill can partner with or pilot her study with, be sure to let her know. What is the best way to get in touch with you?
The best way would be on LinkedIn. You can find me there, Courtney Hill, Glimpse Diagnostics.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.